You understand how to play D&D, and you're ready for the basic DM guide, how to be a good dungeon master. So in this video, we will prepare for your first session by writing an adventure, which you can download from the Dungeon Masters Guild for free. Hi, Bob here, and welcome to Bob World Builder, the D&D channel where new and experienced players can come together so we can all improve our games. Subscribe for new videos every Wednesday under your subscriptions tab. Alright, this will be a mixture of DM tips and world building tips, so make sure you stick around to see all the free tools that I use to make my game prep easy. In the next part of the series, I will run this module for a small group so you can see the difference between game prep and what actually happens. And you can download the complete adventure now using the link in the description to play it with your gaming group. Okay, as of filming this video, these are my actual notes for this beginner's mini module. And we'll begin right at the top with setting. I've played some sci-fi and some Wild West D&D 5e, and if that's what you're into, go for it. But we're going to stick with generic medieval fantasy because that's the primary genre of D&D 5e, and we want this adventure to fit into any fantasy world, so we'll have it take place on the road. We don't have to know where the party is going or where they're coming from. Furthermore, we don't have to create a town. That's a topic for another video. Next, encounters. Encounters are the backbone of our adventure. They are where the player characters interact with the setting. There's no perfect number of encounters per session, but 5 or fewer will help us keep this adventure to around an hour of play, and we definitely want to hit on the 3 pillars of D&D: social interaction, exploration, and combat. This is critical because we're writing this beginner module where we want to hook new players and hold their attention by keeping things moving quickly and using a variety of encounter types. So here's a list of encounter types we probably want to include: NPC interactions, an investigation and/or puzzle and/or trap, some combat, and a reward, and maybe a twist. It's very important to reward our PCs, and that twist doesn't have to be mind-blowing, just something that tells the players when they think they've reached the end that there's more to uncover should they choose to take action. Now, the hook is how we present this quest to our party, and an easy way to do this is to have an NPC just ask for help. NPCs are really how you as the DM bring the setting to life, especially in an adventure like this where we don't have a familiar or detailed location. And something I really want to include here is this blind NPC intro idea that I think a friend in my gaming group came up with, where an elderly, visually impaired NPC asks the party what they look like to determine if they're tough enough for the mission. So they work as our hook or call to action, a classic quest giver, and an invitation to our players to get into character right off the bat. And as to why this person is on the road, I figure they're part of a traveling troupe of entertainers or merchants, maybe on their way to or from some kind of festival. After our hook, the next thing I started thinking about is the combat scenario, specifically how to ensure that new players won't feel bad about attacking the creatures that we choose, or maybe providing ways that combat could be ended non-violently. So I came up with some silly and uncharismatic creatures and narrowed it down to these 3: nilbogs, blights, and bugs. So nilbogs because goblins are a good choice, but they're a little cliche, and nilbogs are basically goblins but much more hilarious. We'll touch on that in a second. Twig blights. Like goblins, they are low HP, but they're not even necessarily a living animal creature, like they're these possessed plants in a way, so they're another guilt-free enemy. And giant insects because people don't generally care about killing bugs in real life, and fire beetles are a really cool one with this bioluminescence that will be great for a night or dark encounter. Some honorable mentions here were the ooze, these amorphous, amoebic creatures that will just dissolve your flesh or your armor depending on what kind they are. Sturges, which are basically giant mammalian mosquitoes, also a pretty guilt-free enemy. Skeletons, pretty classic but cliche, and hard to explain why there'd be skeletons roaming around this area. And boggles, not as cliche, but basically tiny fey boogeymen that have some silly abilities as well, but too many hit points really for what we're trying to do. Now here's the nilbog, a goblin that has been possessed by a trickster spirit, and that spirit will just jump to the nearest goblin if the host is killed. It has some funny spells like vicious mockery, literally hurting people with insults, and anyone who attacks it might end up praising it, and it can use a reaction to heal itself. Definitely setting us up for a comical combat scenario. So the nilbog will be our big bad evil guy for this adventure. And here are my unedited, very stream of consciousness notes of how to string this all together. Traveling troop booted out of nearest town. Harvest festival, maybe. Don't want to lock in the season here. Because they were accused of making trouble. Specifically, it was their goblin cohort, so one of the members of this troop who started causing trouble in town. Because they were turned into a nilbog, because goblins in the nearby forest summoned the spirit. But that leads to the question of how did the host die, and how did the spirit not jump to one of those goblins who summoned it if they were right nearby? So I came up with the idea that the host was left to starve, but still, why? And here we go, because these goblins summoned it on an ancient druidic ritual site, and this infused the nilbog spirit with some crazy druidic powers that the goblins feared. Hashtag blights for life, because this is how we can even pull our twig blights into the adventure. Now the goblin from the troop is possessed by this nilbog spirit in the woods, creating a little band of twig blight, phony goblin minions to praise him. And the troop needs the party to help fight the blights and capture or cure their gobbo buddy. Since writing that, I've fleshed out this adventure a little more in my head, but I have yet to write it down. So now we're going to go live, so to speak, and you'll get to see how I do my session prep and some of the tools that I use. Here we go. Okay, I will drop some timestamps below for when the different tools come up, and another one for if you just want to skip this part of the video. Here we go. Let's start by dividing this up into our few different areas for the adventure. So we're going to have Area 1. This will be our roadside camp. Area 2 will be our ritual site. And Area 3, that'll be the cavern or / temple where our party members will face off against the nilbog and some of these blights. So starting in Area 1 with the roadside camp, of course we begin with our first NPC, so I'll just call this our call to action NPC, and this is where we can bring in our first tool. This is one of my favorite things to use when prepping for D&D because it's really fun and provides useful world building information. Okay, this website is really great because it allows you to quickly generate NPCs by setting parameters as you like. You can set race, sex, alignment, plot hooks that they might even provide for the party, and an occupation. It gives you a lot of great details about their physical appearance, which is something I always like to share with my players, and it gives you a couple of personality traits to work with as well. In addition to that, it provides ability scores. I don't use those that much, but we might for this adventure. It provides relationship status with sexual orientation and alignment tendencies. I think this is a pretty interesting way to look at alignment in general as a score instead of just purely one alignment. But we'll do one practice here just to create our call to action NPC. So I think this individual should be a human, and I'm kind of thinking of them as an old man, so we'll do it with that. Their alignment, we'll just choose good. We already have a plot hook for them, so I'm not going to worry about that. And as far as occupation goes, they're going to have a profession. So you can just choose a typical class here, but I'll go with profession. And then it breaks it down by social class, so I'll call them an entertainer. And we want this profession to be, storyteller sounds interesting, but I think fortune teller is a really cool one. And then we'll generate. So we end up with Leaf Glory Buff, a 44-year-old male human fortune teller. He has a bald head and brown eyes, rough black skin, stands about 5'9", has a regular build. You can see all the details here. It's really great. And it generates this for every NPC you create. So I am a big fan of this website, and I'm not going to copy down this information now. I will generate the NPC details later. Okay, so back to the document here. We have our call to action NPC asking the party for help. After he asks for help, he's going to ask them to describe themselves, because this is how he's going to determine whether or not these are adventure-worthy individuals who are capable of facing the tasks that are at hand. One way or another, he's either going to believe that they are tough or just really like their attitude or something, and then invite them back to camp. Back at the actual camp, the party will meet some other NPCs, and I think what's important here is that we keep in mind that these NPCs could be sidekicks, so this adventure could be run totally solo. But at the camp, they will explain the problem, what has happened to their goblin friend. They will offer a reward. This is important because, of course, some of our players might not just feel it in the goodness of their heart to do this, and they might want some monetary reward or a cool item. They will offer some supplies. They will maybe offer some aid, again, if we want to have these NPCs along as sidekicks. And maybe they have some info on nilbogs. Perhaps our old man NPC has some wisdom as to what might be going on with their friend. But we don't want all of this in camp to go on for too long. So after some carousing, the camp will be attacked by one, maybe, fire beetle. This is where we will bring in tool number 2, Kobold Fight Club. This is a great site because it allows you to search anything in the SRD. You can set your number of players and party level over here, and it will rank the encounter as easy, medium, hard, or deadly. So if I just search in here for giant fire beetle, I can select that and then change the number. So we see that just one fire beetle doesn't even register with any difficulty for 4 players of level 1. So we can increase this, 2 still nothing, 3 still nothing, 4 still nothing, 5, okay, finally registers as an easy encounter, but we don't actually want this encounter to take very long at all. Maybe we don't even need to roll initiative for this. It could almost be more designed as a skill challenge. So back to the document. We will stick with just 1, 2, I would say 3 fire beetles. But of course, we're leaving it up to the DM of how many they really want to put in here. The important part of this is this provides a way that our party can then find the ritual site by following a trail of bioluminescent, bear with my spelling, goo. This will allow our players to do some tracking in the wilderness and really set off into the wild. When they reach the ritual site, the first thing they're going to notice will be this giant stone altar in the middle of this glade in the forest, because again, this is some ancient druidic ritual site. The altar will have some runes, etchings of stick men. Keep in mind that these etchings will really be representing our twig blights, so the players may misconstrue it to be just crude drawings. And a little bit gruesome, but here should be the dead wild goblin that was left behind by his companions. Oh, and here we go, his body can be being eaten by these fire beetles. Here we can have their first actual encounter. So we'll say that that first one should probably be just 1 beetle, and here we can have 3 to 5. Oh, and this definitely should be at night. We'll make sure that this combat looks really cool, and in that case, our roadside camp encounter should really start to happen during the late evening. That will also encourage our party to go to this camp with a bunch of strangers when they might otherwise be cautious to do so. Anyway, so the party will probably want to do some investigating first to determine that this dead goblin is not in fact the goblin they were looking for. But also this is where our puzzle should come into play. So what I'm thinking is that the entrance to Area 3, our cavern/temple, should be this kind of giant spooky tree. This tree being the landmark that these druids built their ritual site at because of some strange properties it has. And I'll have to do some research here, but I know that twig blights are associated with like vampiric trees or something like that. So I'm going to say right now this is our blood tree. But regardless, this tree is our gateway to Area 3. Our party will literally have to enter the tree. That'll be our puzzle, kind of figuring out how to get inside. And I feel like maybe spreading some blood on the tree, perhaps from these beetles or from the goblin, maybe from themselves if they're pretty gross about it. But in any case, after they get into Area 3, this door is going to close behind them. Every good adventure needs a solid point of no return where the party knows, okay, now we are in it. And this could be a good opportunity to cut off some NPC allies if they were tagging along. Just a thought. But when they enter, they're going to hear the laughter of this nilbog just having a great time. Maybe see some shadows in the flickering fire down below. Shadows of twig blights and dancing nilbog. And when they engage with the nilbog, they're going to refuse to leave. Why would they want to? They have all their minions here, things are going great. In fact, they're probably going to demand that the party praises them. We can probably assume some party members won't like that attitude and combat might just start right there, but the nilbog will otherwise start things off, first just by insulting the party and then using vicious mockery. That's our initiative trigger here. Okay, but because we still need a way that things could be ended non-violently, I'm thinking that at the ritual site, these wild goblins may be left behind their book. So after their spirit conjuration obviously went awry when it was infused with these weird druidic powers, they probably would have just left this book behind because they figured, oh, this didn't work or we did it wrong. Maybe it's just written in a language they couldn't understand well enough. But the book will have some info as to how to exercise the spirit, so the players can have that ahead of time when they go into the battle. And then whether they exercise him or whether they defeat him in combat, the spirit will fly off. That's kind of our twist, right? The party members will see the spirit take off toward the next goblin and they'll know that the adventure isn't over. But down here we also need some sweet loot. I will generate that later, but if this is of course a ancient druidic ritual site, there's probably some pretty cool treasures down here. And I'll show these last two tools off right now. One is DonJon, Random Dungeon Generator. You can set all kinds of parameters for this and it creates pretty great stuff that you can save on your computer. But because we really only need a hallway and a room for this dungeon, we don't need it today. The other one is Tabletop Audio. This site is great for providing music or ambiance when you're playing D&D. That will really help your party get into it. Another thing I want to add here is that during character creation for this adventure, we should encourage players to actually be one of the members of this troupe. All too often, the heroes of our adventure come from the outside and have to save the people involved in whatever tragedy is going on, but it's really cool when one of them can be rising up to solve the problem themselves. And because they'll be coming from a kind of vagabond background, it makes sense that they might join the actual adventuring party after this module comes to its end. Alright, we could keep adding details, but this is already more than enough to run a session. So I will edit, format, and publish this on DM's Guild as pay what you want. So you can download it for free, or you can support the channel and help me make more videos like this. Check out these videos if you want to see more awesome content from the DM's Guild, and if you found this helpful, like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and keep building.